One of the big questions in DIY is choosing between nails and screws for your project. Picking the right one can be the difference between success and failure. Today we're going to talk about the pros and cons of nails and screws, tips for choosing the right length and thickness, and advice for working with your material and your environment. I'm Kirsten Dunn, and this is Dunn DIY. When I started out DIYing, one of my biggest concerns was in picking the right nail or screw for the project. How did I know that it was going to hold? How did I know it was long enough or thick enough? I was stuck always having to ask for advice on every single project, and I wanted to be able to know for myself. While some of this is acquired knowledge and experience that takes time, there were a few helpful tips I got along the way and some perspective I've gained since then that will hopefully help you on your DIY journey. First off, a good rule of thumb for picking screws or nails for your project is this. The length should be twice the thickness of the wood you're driving through. So if you're driving through a 1x4 board, which is 3/4 of an inch thick, then you should opt for a 1.5 inch long screw or nail. There are exceptions to this rule, like if you're driving a screw through two 1x4 boards, chances are 1.5 inch screws are just going to be a hair too long, and so you want to opt for 1.25 inch screws instead. I always like to test out the length of my screws against the thickness of the wood because wood varies and sometimes I can get away with a longer screw and sometimes I can't. Always consider the thickness of any hardware you'll be going through at this point too. It can make a big difference. Why should you choose a nail over a screw or vice versa? We're going to give you some of the pros and cons of nails and screws so you can decide for yourself. Nails are generally thinner and are less likely to cause splitting. They can also be less noticeable than even a very small screw, and they're easier to cover up with wood putty. Screws make it easier to be precise with lining up materials, although you can get around this by pre-drilling for your nails. Nails are less expensive, while screws are becoming ever more diverse and accessible. Nails are easier to pull apart with a crowbar, unless of course you're using glue. Screws, however, allow you to take apart your project and reassemble without wrecking it. Hammering nails in can mar your project, especially if you're not experienced with a hammer. And hammering is also difficult when the mass of the project is too small. The hammer tends to bounce off the wood, and you risk damaging the project or yourself. Nails hold up well under force perpendicular to the nail, but not with force parallel to the nail, whereas screws hold up well under both. As well as choosing between nails and screws, it's also important to make sure that you're making a decision that's best for your material and environment. For example, don't choose a thick screw for a thin material. You're just asking for the wood to split. Choose a wood screw for wood projects over other screws like machine screws or sheet metal screws. You'll get the best deal and the screws will work the best. Galvanized nails or screws react with the tannins in cedar and create black bleeding. This doesn't compromise the integrity of your project, but it's not always the look you want and can be avoided by using stainless steel nails or screws. Always choose an exterior grade screw for outdoor usage and choose an interior grade screw to save money on indoor projects. If you're driving screws with a hammer drill, make sure you're using structural grade screws that can handle the force of the drill. If you're unsure of what's the best nail or screw for your project, don't be afraid to ask. It never hurts. Hopefully though, this video gives you a better idea of what you're dealing with and helps empower you to start figuring out the answers to your own questions. And remember, sometimes trial and error is the best way to learn.